For precisely 100,000 years, the universe had achieved what countless philosophers, diplomats, and well-meaning idiots had deemed impossible: perfect peace. Not the kind of peace where everyone pretends to get along while stockpiling antimatter warheads in their basement, but genuine, boring, bureaucratically certified harmony. The secret? Everyone simply stopped moving. Well, not exactly stopped, more like slowed down to the pace of a quantum snail having an existential crisis. The Great Stasis Initiative, as it was pretentiously dubbed by its creators, had transformed nearly every sentient species into living statues, their consciousness ticking along at one thought per century, give or take a few decades. It worked brilliantly. Hard to start a war when your battle cry takes a millennium to complete. The few maintenance robots left active to monitor the sleeping civilizations had developed a particularly dry sense of humor about their charges, occasionally arranging the frozen beings into amusing tableaus just to keep themselves entertained. The Galactic Archives, a massive database that made ancient Wikipedia look like a post-it note, recorded the achievement with characteristic understatement. Peace achieved through universal procrastination. Side effects may include temporal drowsiness and mild cases of existential ennui. Among the sleeping giants, crystalline beings from Arcturus dozed in their silicon dreams. The gaseous intelligences of the Horsehead Nebula condensed into peaceful clouds of contemplation. Even the notoriously argumentative hive minds of Betelgeuse had settled their internal disputes by simply putting all their consciousness on hold. The maintenance robots had developed a betting pool, using theoretical quantum credits, of course, on which species would be the first to accidentally wake up. The smart money was on the silicon-based life forms. They had a history of random system reboots. Nobody bet on the humans. In retrospect, this was an oversight of cosmic proportions. The robots had failed to account for one crucial variable in their calculations: the human digestive system. While most species could happily metabolize a single atom over several millennia, humans had evolved as creatures that needed regular refueling, and their bodies hadn't gotten the memo about this whole peaceful stasis thing. The first warning sign came from a monitoring station in what had once been called North America. A subtle shift in biological readings, a slight increase in metabolic activity. The maintenance robot assigned to the sector dismissed it as a sensor malfunction. After all, nothing had changed in 100,000 years. Why would it change now? The robot would later be remembered as the author of the greatest understatement in galactic history when it logged, "Minor anomaly detected in Sector 3751. Probable sensor calibration error. Suggestion: ignore and continue standard century-long maintenance cycle." Deep in their stasis pods, scattered across their home planet and colonial outposts, humans were beginning to stir. Not because of some grand philosophical awakening or cosmic disturbance, but because of something far more fundamental. They were getting hungry. The peace of 100,000 years was about to be disrupted by the most basic of human needs. The maintenance robots, in their infinite digital wisdom, had perfectly preserved the bodies, minds, and spirits of humanity. They had accounted for every variable except the one that would prove to be their undoing. They had forgotten to leave out snacks. As the first human stomach began to growl, a sound that would take another few decades to reach audible levels, the universe continued its peaceful slumber, blissfully unaware that the greatest disruption to galactic harmony wouldn't come from war or disease or even the heat death of the universe. It would come from missing breakfast. The maintenance robots continued their rounds, checking systems, adjusting parameters, and occasionally arranging frozen beings into recreations of famous artworks. None of them noticed the subtle changes beginning to cascade through the human stasis pods. None of them realized that they were about to witness the end of the longest peace in galactic history, all because they hadn't stocked the cosmic equivalent of a midnight snack. The first human to fully wake up wasn't a diplomat, scientist, or warrior. It was a chef, in what would later be recorded as the most anticlimactic awakening in history. They stumbled out of their stasis pod, looked around blearily, and mumbled something about needing coffee. The maintenance robot assigned to that sector experienced what could only be described as a mechanical panic attack. Its circuits nearly fried trying to process this unprecedented violation of the Great Stasis Protocol. The robot's subsequent report to the Central Monitoring Station consisted entirely of binary screaming. Within days, a time frame that sent shockwaves through a civilization used to measuring change in millennia, more humans began emerging from stasis. Each awakening followed a similar pattern: confusion, disorientation, and an immediate, overwhelming desire for food. The maintenance robots watched in horror as their carefully preserved specimens started raiding ancient food storage facilities and attempting to reactivate long-dormant cooking equipment. The first interstellar transmission in 100,000 years wasn't a philosophical treatise or a declaration of peace. It was a request for delivery. Somehow, in their groggy post-stasis state, humans had managed to hack into the ancient communication networks and send out a galaxy-wide order for anything edible, preferably with hot sauce. The few active alien monitoring stations that received the transmission initially classified it as cosmic background radiation. It took 17 more increasingly desperate messages, each more specific about desired cuisine types, for them to realize they were dealing with an actual civilization-wide emergency. The Galactic Archives, attempting to maintain its dignity, logged the event. First contact re-established with humanity. Primary concern appears to be lack of breakfast options. Situation unprecedented. No protocol exists for handling species-wide food cravings. As humans continued to wake up across different solar systems, they began improvising with whatever resources they could find. Advanced terraforming equipment was repurposed into makeshift grills. Quantum computers were reconfigured to calculate optimal cooking temperatures. One particularly resourceful group turned a dormant antimatter reactor into what they claimed was basically just a really fancy microwave. The maintenance robots, programmed for precision and order, watched in helpless fascination as humans transformed their perfectly preserved stasis facilities into impromptu diners. Their logical circuits struggled to comprehend how a species could prioritize satisfying their taste buds over maintaining the perfect peace that had existed for 100,000 years. But the true chaos began when humans discovered that most of their stored food had, quite naturally, turned to dust over the millennia. This led to what historians would later call the Great Space Restaurant Rush, humanity's first coordinated effort after awakening, focused entirely on establishing eateries across the galaxy. Ships that hadn't moved in 100,000 years were hastily reactivated, their navigation systems reprogrammed with one primary directive: find ingredients. Ancient trade routes were revived, not for diplomacy or commerce, but for the transport of spices. Planetary surveys that had once searched for valuable minerals now scanned for potential farmland. The first alien species to be accidentally awakened from stasis was the crystalline collective of Arcturus. They emerged to find their carefully constructed silicon cities being evaluated for their potential as greenhouse spaces. Their initial outrage turned to curiosity when presented with something humans called comfort food. The awakening of the gaseous intelligences of the Horsehead Nebula followed shortly after, triggered by humans attempting to determine if their nebula could be used to smoke meat. The resulting diplomatic incident was resolved over what would become the first intergalactic barbecue. Even the hive minds of Betelgeuse, known for their million-year philosophical debates, were roused from their slumber by the enticing aromas wafting through space. Their first collective thought in 100,000 years was trying to understand why their sector of space suddenly smelled like garlic. The maintenance robots, their programming stretched to its limits, began documenting the rapidly changing situation with increasing desperation. Day 37, post-initial awakening. Humans have established 1,742 restaurants across 7 solar systems. They are calling it Phase 1. Day 45. First reported case of an alien species voluntarily emerging from stasis to request that thing with the melted cheese. Day 52. Attempts to reinstate stasis protocols have failed. Subjects refuse to return to suspended animation until after dessert. Day 60. have observed humans teaching quantum physics to alien species solely to explain the concept of minute rice. The situation reached a critical point when humans discovered that some alien species had been in stasis for so long that they had forgotten the concept of taste. This sparked what would become humanity's greatest missionary movement, the spreading of culinary consciousness across the galaxy. Diplomatic relations, dormant for millennia, were rekindled over dinner tables. Ancient rivalries were forgotten as species gathered to debate the merits of different cooking techniques. The universe, which had known perfect peace through perfect stillness, was now experiencing a different kind of harmony, one built on shared meals and recipe exchanges. The maintenance robots, their initial panic giving way to resignation, began to adapt. They updated their protocols to include restaurant recommendations and started maintaining databases of food allergies across species. One particularly advanced unit developed an algorithm for calculating the optimal ratio of spices for cross-species palatability. As more civilizations awakened, drawn by the increasingly complex network of culinary activity, the galaxy experienced what philosophers would later call the Great Taste Awakening. Species that had never before needed to eat began developing appreciation for flavors. Beings of pure energy learned to enjoy the texture of physical food, even if they couldn't actually consume it. The Galactic Archives, struggling to maintain its formal tone, noted, "The introduction of brunch appears to have had a greater impact on interspecies relations than 100,000 years of diplomatic initiatives. Further research required to understand why mimosas are now considered a vital component of peace negotiations." The humans, seemingly oblivious to the cosmic upheaval they had caused, continued their culinary conquest of space with cheerful determination. They established cooking schools on gas giants, fusion-powered food trucks in asteroid belts, and drive-through restaurants in stable orbit around black holes. When asked why they had awakened from the perfect peace of stasis, humans provided answers that the other species found simultaneously profound and puzzling. You can't appreciate peace on an empty stomach. The universe was missing flavor. Someone had to teach the cosmos how to cook. The maintenance robots, their original purpose now obsolete, found new meaning in their existence. They became critics, compiling the first Michelin guide to cover multiple galaxies. Their precise measurements and attention to detail, once used to maintain stasis pods, proved perfect for evaluating consistency in restaurant quality. As the last pockets of sleeping civilization stirred, drawn by the irresistible aromas of humanity's cosmic cuisine, the universe settled into a new kind of peace. Not the sterile silence of stasis, but a living, breathing harmony built on shared meals and the universal language of food. The great stasis had ended not with a bang, but with a dinner bell. And somehow, that made perfect sense. The transformation of the once dormant galaxy into an interstellar culinary empire happened faster than anyone could have predicted, except humans who insisted that this was actually pretty slow service. The previously peaceful sectors of space became bustling centers of gastronomic innovation, where cosmic phenomena competed with cooking aromas for attention. Deep space probes, originally designed to search for signs of intelligent life, were now being repurposed to locate rare ingredients. One particularly ambitious expedition ventured into the heart of a nebula because someone swore they could smell truffles. They didn't find truffles, but they did discover a new form of bioluminescent fungi that, when properly prepared, tasted remarkably like blue cheese. The Quantum Computing Collective, awakened by the scent of freshly baked bread, a feat that scientists are still trying to explain, immediately devoted their vast processing power to calculating the perfect pizza recipe. After analyzing trillions of possible combinations, they concluded that pineapple was, in fact, statistically significant to optimal flavor profiles, causing the first interstellar food fight. Restaurant chains spread across the galaxy like a particularly tasty virus. Each human colony developed its own specialty, leading to what became known as the Stellar Cuisine Wars. The Orion Belt became famous for its fusion sushi, while the Crab Nebula, ironically, specialized in vegan dishes. The maintenance robots, now fully committed to their new roles as food critics, developed increasingly sophisticated rating systems. One particularly enthusiastic unit created a 17-dimensional scale for evaluating restaurant ambience, including factors such as quantum aesthetics and temporal seasoning. Diplomatic relations took on entirely new forms. Treaties were negotiated over tasting menus, and international incidents were resolved with cook-offs. The first intergalactic cooking competition drew so many participants that it temporarily altered the gravitational waves of 3 solar systems. The crystalline collective, having developed a surprising affinity for spicy food, established the universe's first hot sauce repository. Their crystal matrices proved perfect for storing and aging various compounds that would have melted through conventional materials. They began producing artisanal hot sauces that literally glowed with heat. Even the notorious void dwellers, ancient beings who had never shown interest in physical matter, emerged from their dimensional pockets to investigate what they called fascinating flavor geometries. They couldn't eat in any conventional sense, but they developed a method of appreciating food by analyzing its quantum probability patterns. The galactic archives struggled to keep up with the rapidly evolving situation. Day 147. Humans have successfully taught plasma beings how to appreciate texture. Method unclear. Involves something called mouthfeel. The economic impact was staggering. Ancient currency systems, dormant for millennia, were revived and immediately pegged to the value of rare spices. The first intergalactic stock exchange opened, dealing exclusively in restaurant franchises and recipe patents. Innovation flourished in unexpected ways. A group of theoretical physicists discovered that certain source combinations could temporarily alter local spacetime, leading to the development of temporal gastronomy, where meals could be enjoyed backwards, forwards, or sideways through time. The hive minds of Betelgeuse, after centuries of debate, finally agreed on something. Their collective consciousness made them excellent food delivery services. They could simultaneously process orders from millions of customers while maintaining perfect temperature control through sheer force of will. Training academies sprang up across the galaxy, teaching everything from basic knife skills to advanced gravitational cooking techniques. The most prestigious institution, located in a repurposed space station, had a waiting list longer than most species' lifespans. Cultural exchange reached new heights as different civilizations began sharing their ancestral recipes, those they could remember after 100,000 years of stasis. This led to some interesting fusion cuisines, like quantum-shifted sushi and plasma-grilled steaks that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The maintenance robots documented the phenomenon with increasing sophistication. The application of zero-point energy in coffee brewing has revolutionized morning routines across 17 star systems. First recorded instance of a black hole being used as a pressure cooker. Results were excellent, though retrieval proved challenging. Confirmation that faster-than-light travel can be motivated by accurately timed dinner reservations. The universe, which had once been a model of perfect stasis, became a living, breathing marketplace of flavors and aromas. Space stations were retrofitted with kitchen ventilation systems. Asteroid fields were converted into orbiting farmers' markets. Gas giants were tapped for their exotic atmospheric seasonings, and through it all, humanity continued to innovate, expand, and most importantly, eat. They approached the preparation and sharing of food with the same determination that had once driven them to explore space. Every new discovery was an opportunity for a recipe, every first contact a chance to exchange cooking tips. The peace that followed wasn't the artificial tranquility of stasis, but something far more dynamic and sustainable. It was the peace that comes from shared meals, from understanding other cultures through their cuisines, from the universal recognition that good food transcends all boundaries, even those of space and time. The final phase of the galaxy's culinary awakening brought changes that even the most optimistic food enthusiasts hadn't anticipated. What started as a simple quest to satisfy human hunger had evolved into something far more profound, a complete restructuring of galactic society around the dinner table. The Galactic Council, dormant for 100,000 years, reconvened in what was supposed to be an emergency session to address the chaos. The meeting quickly derailed when someone brought in appetizers. 6 hours later, they had established the first universal food rights, guaranteeing all sentient beings access to decent meals and protection against badly prepared food. Competition shows became the new battlegrounds where species could prove their superiority without resorting to warfare. MasterChef Milky Way became the most watched program in history, featuring challenges like Cook in Zero Gravity and Make This Black Hole Edible. The season finale, where contestants had to prepare a 5-course meal during a supernova, drew viewers from 3 neighboring galaxies. The maintenance robots, fully embracing their role in this new order, established the first AI-run restaurant critic network. Their reviews were brutal in their mathematical precision. This establishment's flavor profile achieves only 47.3% of its theoretical maximum. The soup exists in a quantum state of both over- and under-seasoned. The service carries a 99.99% probability of being deliberately slow. Trade routes once used for transferring military supplies now transported essential cooking ingredients. The spice must flow, as humans kept quoting from some ancient text, became the new economic mandate. Entire space fleets were converted into refrigerated transport ships, their captains more concerned with maintaining optimal temperature than defending against pirates, who had, anyway, become more interested in stealing recipes than treasure. The Void Dwellers, after much contemplation, introduced the concept of non-Euclidean cooking, where meals existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. This led to the popular but dangerous trend of quantum dining, where each bite had a probability of being different cuisines. Insurance companies had a field day, education systems were revolutionized. Cooking became a mandatory subject alongside physics and mathematics. Students learned about fusion reactions through the proper application of heat to various ingredients. Quantum mechanics was taught using the double-slit pasta experiment. The Crystalline Collective, having perfected their hot sauce technology, began experimenting with crystal fusion cuisine, dishes that literally grew like geometric formations. Their restaurants became famous for meals that continued to evolve on the plate, creating an interactive dining experience that could last for days. The Galactic Archives, finally embracing the new status quo, updated their mission statement: preserving history, one recipe at a time. Warning, some entries may contain nuts. Peace was maintained not through artificial stasis or diplomatic agreements, but through the universal understanding that you don't start fights at the dinner table. International conflicts were settled with cook-offs, where the stakes were high but the stakes were higher. The maintenance robots observed and recorded it all, their databanks filling with what they considered the most important information in the universe: traditional fusion recipes, both culinary and nuclear, proper etiquette for dining with gaseous beings, how to calculate the perfect toast trajectory in variable gravity. Emergency procedures for quantum cookbook containment. As the final pockets of space were awakened and introduced to the concept of cuisine, something unexpected happened. The perfect peace that had been artificially maintained for 100,000 years was achieved naturally through the simple act of breaking bread together, or whatever equivalent each species preferred. The universe had come full circle. What began as humanity's simple need for breakfast had evolved into a complex, interconnected society where food was the universal language. The peace wasn't perfect. There were still heated arguments about proper cooking techniques and occasional incidents involving experimental recipes, but it was real, alive, and delicious. The last entry in the Galactic Archives before it was converted into a combination library and recipe repository read, "In retrospect, perhaps we should have just planned a nice dinner party 100,000 years ago, instead of putting everyone into stasis. Addendum, the humans were right, everything is better with hot sauce." And so the galaxy continued its eternal dance through space, now accompanied by the sounds of sizzling pans, the aroma of countless cuisines, and the satisfied sighs of beings who had discovered that the secret to universal harmony wasn't in sleeping through the ages, but in sharing a good meal with good company. The maintenance robots, their primary directive of maintaining peace technically fulfilled, albeit in an unexpected way, satisfied themselves with leaving one final observation in their logs. Mission accomplished, pass the salt.